Here.
Here.
Sorry. Is it working? All right. We're good. So everyone has the agenda and a copy of the meeting minutes from last meeting. First on the agenda is to review and approve the meeting minutes from November 3rd. Are there any changes, deletions, additions? Hearing none, accept the motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Minutes are approved from last meeting. Number 2 is, let me read the notice. This is the Sullivan Park project. For Sullivan Park improvements by the Massachusetts DCR. It includes a lot of good things happening there. So I think first up, some representative will come up and kind of give us an overview and present. Oh, before we get started, let me have a motion to open the hearing.
I'll make a motion.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right.
We just have some handouts so you can follow along.
All right, why don't you state your name and your address? Can you turn your mic up? Yep.
Good evening. My name is Jim Jackson. I'm a managing engineer with Park Corporation. My address is 10 Lincoln Road in Foxborough, Mass. With me tonight is Skylar Schick. He is the landscape architect with Shadley Associates, and I also have Lauren Gluck with me. She's a wetland scientist with
Excuse
Park
me.
Corporation.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but would you mind turning this to that camera right there? Thank you. And if you could just try to speak as loudly and clearly into the mic as possible, that would be great.
Okay, yeah. And also I have Danielle Mellett, and she is the DCR project manager for this Sullivan Park project. So we're here tonight to present Sullivan Park improvements. Currently, as you can see on the screen, there is a baseball field on the park, and the improvements will include turning it into more of a passive recreational park. And Skylar will give you a little more detail on what improvements are planned for the park. But as you can see on the photos, it's currently basically just a grassed park with the baseball field, the outfield. Some of it's a little run down, some of the grass, but it is currently being used for a baseball field. I guess Skylar can get up and talk about what the proposed improvements are.
Do you mind if I remove my mask?
No, that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. My name is Skylar Chick. I'm a licensed landscape architect and a senior associate with Shadley Associates. As Jeb mentioned, we are the landscape architect. We're the prime consultant working directly for the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. So the DCR is really looking to invest significantly in this currently underutilized site. As Jim mentioned, it's an existing ball field. It has heavily compacted soils. It's barely used by anyone. It is surrounded by a vast urban environment, and the DCR has committed to making a significant investment here. So the park itself is bound by Revere Beach Boulevard on the east, which is the bottom side of the plan in front of you. It also includes Revere Street to the south, which is the left side of the screen. To the west is a parcel of land that is owned by National Grid, and further to the west is Diamond Creek. And to the north is a recently completed residential development. It's the 6-story building at 320 Revere Beach Boulevard. A portion of the DCR property extends behind that property on the western side. And so the entire project area is a little less than 2 acres. As Jim mentioned, again, this is really an underutilized ball field. The DCR wants to turn this into a passive community park. We've conducted 2 public meetings over the past year and a half for this project to get input from the public. The first meeting was about presenting 2 different concept design alternatives, seeing what people like, dislike, and then with that information, we developed the final design plan, which is before you tonight. The park itself, let's see, the improvements will start at Revere Beach Boulevard on the eastern side. The existing site is really below the adjacent roadways. There's a substantial slope going down from Revere Beach Boulevard as well as from Revere Street. The site as it is today is not ADA accessible, so if you're in a wheelchair or you're mobility impaired, you cannot access the site in an accessible manner. So for this project, we're proposing 2 new entrances from the sidewalk at Revere Beach Boulevard. There's a large plaza, paved plaza, that runs parallel to the street. It's roughly at the street elevation. It'll be paved with concrete, a mix of colored concrete banding and asphalt pavers. It will be punctuated by 8 tree pits. So those will be deciduous shade trees shading the plaza, and they will be underplanted with native coastal grasses. The plaza will also include benches and little game tables. So from that plaza, you can view the beach across the street and the ocean, or you can look to the west into the park. And we're sort of creating a terracing effect where the plaza is at the higher elevation, and then to the west of that is a Bocce Court terrace, and further to the west is what we're calling the Great Lawn area. So if we move to the Bocce Terrace, that is 2 parallel Bocce Courts. They would be synthetic turf surfacing surrounded by concrete pavement and a series of benches in different configurations. It would also be surrounded by low native planting as well as shade trees. You can also see the dark gray lines on the plan represent all of the paved walkways. Those are 8-foot wide asphalt walkways that are all universally accessible. The goal is that this park is 100% universally accessible. Let's see, so the central lawn area is approximately 1/3 of an acre. It slopes at roughly 2% from the eastern end to the western end, which is from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen. It's surrounded, again, by a loop walkway because we're trying to create a network of accessible pathways. Let's see, in the lower right corner, there's a circular piece of pavement that is a water feature. This was something that the public requested at our first public meeting. So it would be paved in concrete. It would have 8 water jets that are flush in the pavement, and some of them would have vertical water jets that would get to be about 4 feet tall. Some of them would be shower spray heads, and they would all have fog features, and the water feature will be managed by an activator bollard. So it won't be running constantly. If someone wants to come and use it, a kid, an adult, anyone, they push the button on the activator bollard and the water will come on for a predetermined period of time. And then it will drain in the middle. That area is also surrounded by little granite block seats, so parents can supervise their kids while they're playing. Over on the right side of the plan, which is adjacent to the abutting development, we are proposing outdoor fitness equipment. That's that blue band that runs from east to west. So there are 5 pieces of equipment, all with signage, and those would be installed on a porous, poured-in-place rubber surfacing. It would be a resilient surfacing similar to what you see in playgrounds. Let's see, over on the upper left side of the screen, there's a hexagonal shape. That is a proposed shade shelter, all metal construction on a concrete plaza. The intent is that that would be used for activities, events that the DCR would hold. It could be community events, or it could just be seating under a shaded canopy. The golden color that is on the screen represents a conservation seed mix or a meadow mix. That would be comprised of native grasses and wildflowers. So part of the DCR's goal here and on all of their projects is to not just attract people and pedestrians, but to improve the wildlife and habitat value. As I mentioned earlier, this really is a very sterile site. It's compacted lawn. There are very few trees on site, many of which are invasive species. So this project tries to mitigate that. So one is introducing a meadow mix, which would be attractive to pollinator species like birds, butterflies, bees, and other insects. We are also introducing a very large number of trees. The existing site, we do have to remove 10 trees. Half of them are tree of heaven, which is an invasive species in Massachusetts. 2 of them are honey locusts, which are non-native. But the result is that we are introducing 101 brand new trees on this project. 63 are deciduous shade trees and ornamental trees, and 38 are a mix of evergreen trees. So we think that is a huge improvement to this site. In addition, people come to a site if they can have shade, and currently there's very little shade in this park. The last piece I'll talk about is on the west side of the abutting development. We're showing a wider asphalt pathway that loops around and then connects to the rear of the building. That building actually has an opening in it. And if I just turn the board for a moment. The image in the lower right shows the rear of that adjacent building. You can see that there is a cutout and an access driveway. And in the distance is Revere Beach Boulevard. And this driveway slopes down and connects to the underground parking garage at that development. And then this rear side comes out onto the DCR property. So the DCR is working with that abutter to secure a no-cost easement, access easement, so that the DCR can use maintenance vehicles through that area. Also, emergency vehicles will have access to the park through that space. The project is proposing a vehicular swing gate, so the public can't just drive onto the park. At that point, it would be restricted. However, there would be a paved opening where pedestrians are not precluded from accessing the site from that location. So that really sums up the plan. There are some areas that are labeled bioretention areas, and I skipped those for the moment because Jim will come back and he will talk about the stormwater management strategy for this project. But for now, I'd like to turn it over to Lauren Gluck, who will talk about the resource areas.
Thank you, Skylar. Hi, my name is Lauren Gluck. I'm a professional wetland scientist with Park Corporation. I'm going to switch out the plan to one that shows the resource areas, which you also have a handout of. Okay, so first I'll go over the resource areas on the site, and then I'll talk a little bit about what the impacts to resource areas are proposed for this project. In blue on the west side of the site, You'll see a vertical line and then two lines kind of bowing off of that. That represents Diamond Creek, which is a tidal waterway along the west. It's actually off-site to the west, and then two bordering vegetated wetlands. Those areas are all entirely off-site. However, we delineated them because there are buffer zones that encroach onto the site. Shown in green is the 100-foot buffer zone associated with the bordering vegetated wetlands, which cuts into the western portion of the park. And then shown in yellow are the 100-foot and 200-foot offsets to the river. So there's 200-foot riverfront area that bisects the park north to south. Also shown is a purple dashed line. It's a little bit harder to see, but it kind of follows the toe of the slope all the way up to the toe of Revere Beach Boulevard, and that is the 100-year floodplain elevation of 11, which is associated with the tidal waterway. That's classified as land subject to coastal storm flowage. So clearly you can see portions of the existing park are located within buffer zone, riverfront area, and bordering land subject to flooding. Land subject to coastal storm flowage. I'm going to flip this plan over. So this plan, it breaks down what the impact areas look like within the riverfront area. All of the riverfront area to be disturbed consists of previously disturbed areas, lawn, pathways, baseball diamond. Those shown in purple are what would be considered degraded riverfront area under the WPA, which include areas that are consisting of gravel along the existing road on the west side of the site, as well as the baseball diamond, which lacks topsoil. So for the purpose of demonstrating our compliance with performance standard, those areas would be excluded from the general performance standard. The areas shown in orange are proposed new structures within the 200-foot riverfront area that are on existing lawn. So while not considered degraded, they are clearly very disturbed areas. Soils are pretty compacted, very minimal topsoil there. As Skylar pointed out during his discussion, there will be a lot of different native plantings throughout the site, as well as conservation seed mix within the riverfront area. So we actually have a substantial amount of restoration to the riverfront area that more than offsets what the proposed structures and new impervious surfaces are there. So that's the intent of this figure, is to show what the new impacts are and how they're being offset. So I believe that sums up our discussion of resource areas. If Jim would like to come back and talk a little about stormwater.
Okay, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the stormwater design for the site. Currently, most of the flow on the site travels from east to west into Diamond Creek through sheet flow, with the exception of the sidewalks along Revere Beach Boulevard and a small portion on the south side of the site, which also drains to Revere Beach Boulevard. And in the final design, the sidewalks will continue to flow to the Revere Beach Boulevard, as well as a portion of that, although a smaller portion of the site on the south will also continue to flow that way. The drainage going to Diamond Creek, since they aren't really vehicle roadways, they're just for pedestrians, with an occasional emergency vehicle or maintenance vehicle coming down the trail. We really aren't required to treat the stormwater by the Mass Stormwater Handbook, but DCR, wants to take the effort to treat it, so we did go through a treatment system, and we used a couple of systems. We used bioretention, and then we used qualified pervious areas. So starting with the plaza area up towards Revere Beach Boulevard, that area is going to drain to the north, where it's caught in an area drain that is conveyed to a sediment basin, and then eventually down to a bioretention area on the plan. It's on the top left corner of the plan. The Bocce Courts, those will, the Bocce Courts themselves will have an underdrain, and then the area around the Bocce Courts will drain to a bioretention area number 2 that's between the plaza and the Bocce Courts, and that will eventually overflow to a bioretention area to the south of the lawn, and then eventually be piped towards the west side of the site, where it'll flow across the National Grid property to Diamond Creek. The lawn area, the majority of that drainage will be flowing through these qualified pervious areas, and that will allow for infiltration and treatment of the stormwater before the remainder sheet flows off towards Diamond Creek. We really tried to keep the number of structures down on it and do a lot of sheet flow, a lot of low-impact development, stormwater treatment on the site, and as well as the 3 bioretention areas that will be planted.
Let me just interrupt you for a second. I have
Sure.
a question on where the stormwater is exiting. I see 2, it's on the south side where you have what I'm looking at, where it says pipe flared ends. It looks like there's a grading. Is that where the water is coming out?
Yeah, that's where the water will be coming out after it has passed through the bioretention areas.
Okay.
And then, then it'll sheet flow across the utility property to the Diamond Creek. And, continue the pre-development conditions, really.
Okay.
But the stormwater will have had some treatment and some infiltration before that point.
Okay.
I think that pretty much covers what I have to say about the stormwater, unless there's any questions.
All right, I'm gonna let the commissioners ask questions, and then we'll get to the public.
Mr. Chair, just a few questions of clarification. I'm referring right now to the aerial photograph on this sheet. I just want to make clear in my own mind, in that photograph, that gray area on the north side of the property, there's a building there right now. That's the building, because it almost looks like in the sheet, that's an open area, but that's where the boulevard, whatever that.
Yeah, that's that residential, the new residential development there.
Also, there is a slip of land that is in a gray, right next to Revere Street. Is that part of this development? There's a gray strip on going up Revere Street. You're right there. That is or is not part of the project?
Yeah,
That is part of the DCR property. It's existing lawn now. We will be doing some grading and putting a walkway along an existing retaining wall. So that is part of the project, the edge of it, but it's existing lawn.
What on the actual color rendition, there's a dark gray line going parallel. I'm referring to this line right here. I don't know. Right there. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's a walkway there. That's a new walkway.
And is that going to keep the existing slope that's there now from the property? Because Revere Street goes up on that side. Do you intend to keep the existing slope that's present?
Yes, the existing slope would remain. We're paving along the top of, there's a retaining wall that separates that area from the hillside that flows into the park. So we're paving along the top of there and connecting Revere Beach Boulevard with the sidewalk at Revere Street. Does that make sense?
Yes. Next question. In the piece of property that's in back of the building, does there have to be any fire access there? That strip that goes? Yes. It seems to be right in back of the building, and it abuts the back of the building? I don't know if there
It
has
is
to
on
be
the,
access.
it is behind the building, but it is DCR property. The abutting property does not own that land. They only own about a 5 or 7 foot wide strip behind their building. But the DCR is getting an access agreement with that abutter so that they can use their driveway to access that DCR parcel behind it. And that this project would build a wide enough access path on that rear side so that emergency vehicles can use it. So that could be fire, it could be ambulances, police if they needed to.
Does the DCR or Revere Fire Department or anybody have to give you some kind of designation as to what's necessary back there? Or do you seek it from any of those agencies?
I'm going to defer to Danielle Mellett from the DCR. She's coming up.
I'm short. Danielle Mellett, DCR Project Manager. Right now, we're working with the city and with the developer to get an easement through the building so that our, as Skylar had mentioned, emergency and maintenance vehicles can access the back, and that's how our vehicles will maintain the park because there's such a steep slope from Revere Street and Revere Beach Boulevard. So we're working with the property developer right now in the city of Revere to get that easement. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but, I thought when we approved that apartment or condominium project, that was one of the aspects that they pointed out to rear access.
Yes.
Whether it was their prerogative to even call that their property or not, I don't know.
It's definitely DCR property. I'm not sure of any of those agreements that happened with the property developer and the city of Revere for access to that. I'd have to check that.
Did you mention somebody else has property back there? Was it
So
was it?
so between the DCR property and Diamond Creek is the strip of land National Grid owns that property. So there's a horizontal strip of land owned by National Grid.
If I'm not mistaken, that Diamond Creek came up once before as a functioning drainage area. Is that true? Is that true? Eventually leading to Pines River, I believe.
Yeah, so it's a tidal creek that leads into Rumney Marsh. Yes, it's tidal. Is that your question? If it's tidal? Yes. It's a pretty well-defined channel with almost vertical banks, and then there are some marsh areas bordering it. Those two, I don't know what plan is up right now, if it shows the wetlands bordering it. But if you go just further north, you'll get to Rumney Marsh, which is a really expansive salt marsh, which eventually drains out into the ocean.
And if I'm not mistaken, when we dealt with that property on the other side of Revere Street, that creek was still functioning as a drainage area. That was on the property across from Revere Street. I'm not quite sure I remember the name of that property. There's so many names.
Yeah, so I was there yesterday, and that ditch is full of water, and it's going in the culvert underneath Revere Street. So it's functioning as drainage.
Yeah, and
That's a drainage area. It would be going northeast, more or less, northeast.
yeah, and it has tidal flow, so both directions. And every time I've seen it, it's held water, and it's actually mapped as a perennial river. So that's why we're showing 200-foot riverfront area offsetting the channel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have a question. So does your plan include, you did say that the drainage coming from the bioretention areas was going to drain to Diamond Creek. So does your plan include a structure to handle that water, that flow to Diamond Creek?
No, the intent is to have it sheet flow from where those flared end sections are across the National Grid property. As it's kind of doing right now, it all sheet flows across the National Grid property. And we do reduce the flows, the peak flows on the storms, with our bioretention areas.
So I assume that in grading, are you increasing the grade at all, or are you just leveling it out?
I can speak to that. We are raising the grades on the site. So starting at Revere Beach Boulevard, that's where we currently have a fairly steep slope down into the site, which is not ADA accessible. So we are filling that so that we can have a plaza and we can have gently graded walkways that come down into the slope. As we continue westward towards our Bocce Terrace and then the lawn, we are again elevating the site above the existing conditions. A couple reasons for that. One is it allows for better ADA accessibility. Two, it helps to mitigate the size of the adjacent abutment beside it because it's a 6-story building with a massive retaining wall facing public land. And so we're trying to make it a little bit more friendly. The other piece is the existing soils are severely compacted, and we want to mitigate that. And by filling it with fresh material, brand new loam on top, or remediated loam on top, that will help to better infiltrate the site. We'll have better chance of trees and our other plant material surviving in that environment. And then the other piece is that Par Corporation, along with the DCR, conducted stormwater test pits in early September on the site. I believe there were 5 test pits done to find where groundwater was to make sure that we have the proper separation for rain gardens or for the bioretention areas. And by elevating the site, it helps to achieve that so that all the stormwater is being captured in these areas. And then those 2 flare ends that you're seeing at the property line, those are overflow discharges. It's not anticipated that during any rain event that they're always going to be discharging water. So there are steps along the way before anything excess passes beyond that, beyond our project site.
I agree. I feel like that area is kind of like a giant fishbowl, and that was part of my concern, is that if there is another 100-year storm, is everything just going to be drowning? So I figure you would build it up to maximize the storm flowage. I was also wondering if you could just better describe the bioretention areas.
Yeah, we do have a detail of those. I don't think it's on the board. We could pull it off the plan set.
Oh, you. I just asked.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see the details in the corner, but they show, the bioretention areas are a depressed area, not really a pond, but a depressed area. And then they're filled with a bioretention soil, which is a mix of sand and topsoil. And then they'll be planted. So the intent is the water comes into the depressed area, seeps into the ground, and is used for those plantings. And then they do have overflows. In a major storm event, they will overflow and go into the flared end sections.
So it would look like a flower bed kind of, but it has functionality to it.
Yes, slightly depressed area, but it's not a pond. It's just a depressed area, and be planted. Yeah.
What's on top of it? Is it like a mulch or gravel or?
All of those areas are located within our conservation seed mix, so they will be seeded similar to a meadow, but they will have species that can tolerate water inundation versus what would be planted along the hillside. So the intent is that it looks fairly seamless, but it does have a function, so that you can appreciate it, but you don't have to be in it to understand it.
A question about the walkways. What was the decision about using asphalt instead of a more pervious type of walkway, like gravel or something?
So that did come up in our discussions with DCR. So DCR has several divisions within it, and we always do reviews at certain milestone points. And that question came up. There are a couple of reasons. One is a loose fill material or something like stone dust, which can be compacted, can be difficult to maintain in a sloped condition. And as I had mentioned earlier, the intent is that this is a 100% universally accessible park. So using a material like either of those would not hold up in the long run. The other piece is this is a coastal environment. The beach and the ocean are right across the street. And the DCR deals with blowing sand constantly, especially in the winter with the nor'easters. So DCR has to be able to clean up that sand as well. And if there's a loose fill material or something that's not really rigid or solid like asphalt pavement, it's much more difficult to clean that up and maintain an accessible pathway.
What's the difference between using asphalt and concrete?
So asphalt, well, asphalt technically is a flexible material. Concrete is a rigid material. In this application, they're both impervious surfaces. So the next biggest difference really is cost. Asphalt costs less than concrete.
My last question. Lighting. Is there going to be a light source for the park?
Yeah, so the walkways will be illuminated. The DCR has a standard ornamental style light, which will match the Revere Beach Reservation, which is a historic reservation. So all of the walkways on the plan will be illuminated. The target illumination level is 1/2 foot candle, which is pretty standard for park walkways. And the intent is to not have spillover. So we work with the lighting manufacturer to run photometrics to see what the illumination levels are. And so where we are lighting walkways, you can do an elongated light distribution, so you're not spilling over onto abutting properties or towards natural resource areas like a vegetated wetland or the creek.
So will they stay lit at night, all night, or are they going to be on a timer?
That will be up to the DCR. Typically, DCR does not light parks, but they did request it for this park, I think in part because it is an urban environment and they're looking at safety, and because the site, even though we're filling, it is still below generally the street elevations. So having it illuminated is a safety factor. Danielle, I don't know if you have anything else to add on that from DCR's perspective.
Skylar actually answered that really well. I can't answer whether or not it would be on all night. I don't know the answer to that. I could get that answer for you, though.
It was more out of curiosity. Any more questions? Do you have any questions, Toby? Do you have any questions? No.
I do have a couple more questions, and then we'll turn it over to the public. I was looking at the stormwater operation and maintenance plan, and on page 6 of 8, it talked about snow removal and recommended snow stockpile locations shown on OM-1. I couldn't find them on that drawing.
Okay, I'd have to check that, and we can add that in.
All right, and then Is there a recommendation for the type of de-icing materials that would be used? Because it required, you know,
I don't believe we made any recommendation. I'm not sure what DCR would generally uses on the sidewalks.
oh, thanks. All right, and then,
I don't think that they would be using anything beyond sand, especially in a resource area, as sand already blows into the site. I don't think that would be a change, but the intent is to plow the sidewalks in the wintertime so that the sidewalks can still be used. Again, I can't fully answer that question, but I do not believe they would use anything beyond sand as a de-icer or anti-slip agent.
okay, I guess well, and the reason that came up is, again, on page 2 of 8, it says, following construction, the completion of the inspection and maintenance requirements shall be the responsibility of the property owner. And then the next paragraph, maintenance inspection should be performed by qualified City of Revere personnel. And then as I read it, it looks like City of Revere personnel are doing the maintenance and the plowing and de-icing, and
No, that it will be strictly DCR maintenance.
so City of Revere shouldn't be mentioned in there.
No.
Okay, so you have to correct that. All right.
DCR has a maintenance facility nearby, and they would be doing all the maintenance and the inspections. They handle a lot of stormwater systems, and they inspect them regularly and make improvements as needed.
Right. So, and then as I went through and kind of answered some of the questions I had forwarded earlier, so it looks like the sewer system's accepting water from the water feature.
Yes.
Does that valve shut off, or is there going to be stormwater also going into that water feature and then going into the sewer?
The way we have it shown now, it's all going to the sewer.
So the sewer would see stormwater?
It would see some stormwater. I mean, we have other projects put in diverters, and we could look at doing that on this project too. To, you know, where it would divert only when the system is in operation. It would go to the sewer, and then other times.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem like in a flooding situation, that's gonna be underwater and just dumping stormwater into the sewer. And
Yeah, it is a good point.
yeah, so, I don't. All right. Trash cans?
Yes, the project will include trash receptacles. So right now, the DCR uses movable or removable trash cans along Revere Beach Boulevard. The reason being they like to take them in the winter. With the coastal winds and the storms, it's really a necessity. So we will be doing that here as well, but they will not be the same ones that are currently out on the street. They'll be different ones, and DCR will continue to maintain those.
All right, and I did have one phone call with one of the abutters. So there's not gonna be a dog park, but people are gonna walk dogs. Will there be any type of stations set up for dog bags or signs reminding people to pick up?
Okay, so DCR, this is not intended to be a dog park. However, DCR does welcome dogs that are leashed to their park. So that would be the case here as well. We have not specifically discussed dog waste bag dispensers, but that's something that we can consider. The DCR does intend to install signage about dogs being in the park. The other piece that I didn't mention before is we do have a water bottle filler, and at the base of that filler is a dog station, a pet station, so dogs can get water as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's
At least they thought
great.
about one of the ends.
But just in general education to the public on how important it is where, you know, dog waste, you know, doesn't end up in the creek. It's just kind of
Or the splash
it's one
pad.
way to keep promoting education of the public, that this is detrimental if you leave your waste on the ground, pick it up.
Absolutely, and DCR has standard signage that we'll include.
Okay, I think you've addressed all my other questions. I had those. Anyone else have any questions before we invite the public?
I think I'm good.
Okay, so is there anyone from the public that would like to speak and ask questions. Well, I got you.
Good evening.
Can you just make sure you've got that mic right in front of you?
Sure.
And your name and address.
My name is Joan Lanzillo-Hassey. I live at the St. George, 350 Revere Beach Boulevard in Unit 8-8D. So I'm not speaking here just for myself. I spoke with the Board of Managers last night in a meeting, and they've authorized me to speak on their behalf. This is with the blessing of the board. We'd like to start out by saying that we are thrilled for this park. We think it's going to enhance our neighborhood. It's going to enhance the quality of life for everybody on the Boulevard and Revere Street. And we're so happy to see that it was not a DCR maintenance facility, which was once what they proposed, but they're coming up with an incredible plan to make the livelihood of the people in the area more viable. So we thank you for the DCR for doing that. We do have a couple of questions, though, and concerns. First of all, as you know, behind the park, there is the right-of-way. And in 2019, we had to replace the chillers at the St. George. And the only way they were actually able to reach our site was through, from flatbeds that came along that right-of-way behind where the boulevard now is and onto our site, and the cranes to take the old chillers off and put the new chillers on. So we're seeing here, my first question was going to be, was there going to be a roadway on the north side of the park against their wall from the boulevard that heavy vehicles would be able to traverse onto the park and around? But obviously, we're looking at, from the presentation here and in the drawings, they're not making provisions for that. So that is our first concern about it's restricting, or it's going to be limiting our ability in the future to get any heavy equipment onto our facility. So I just have to ask, one of the people presenting here tonight said that they had public hearings, and this is the second of the design. So obviously, the first design, personally speaking, we did not know about any first design, and I wanted to ask the question, did the first design include a driveway for heavy equipment?
Thank you. So we developed two concept designs.
Make sure you're right into that mic.
Sorry. We developed two concept designs. The first public meeting was held in July of 2020, so almost a year and a half ago, through the DCR. The DCR's program does not include having any kind of heavy vehicular access through DCR property along the area that I believe you've described. So it was not considered then, and it hasn't currently been considered in the design that you see before you.
Okay, thank you. So obviously, we just wanted to voice our concerns about that, because that will potentially cause a problem for us in the future. However, and as you indicated in the drawings here, you're going to have accessibility to the westerly side of the project through the driveway of the abutter of the boulevard. And it says here that you're going to have gates, so people can't just drive through there and take a left and go into the park. So I'm assuming those gates will be something that the police and fire and utility companies would be able to access without going through a process of getting permission. And that, again, is also taken into consideration with the St. George. because if they cannot get down our driveway, then they would have to go through the neighbor's driveway, because now they're not going to be able to go through the park anymore. So any firefighting vehicles or things of that nature would have to be taken into consideration. So, about the easement and the access, is that, and if I can ask the developers again, this easement or slash access that you're going to be getting from the Boulevard, is that going to be an open access, or is it going to be an access that is going to be a fee attached, or have you had any conversation with them about their neighbors, quote, the St. George, having that same access?
So the easement access is for emergency access to get to the park. So fire trucks, police would have access and a code to get to the park. As far as easement access to access your building, that would be something you'd have to talk to the city of Revere about, because that is not DCR property. That is the property developer's easement that they would be granting us. And I believe they're also they're possibly also granting the city of Revere easement access as well. I don't know where that status stands, but this easement that we're speaking of is directly for DCR access to state property, not to other properties. So, like I said, your building would have to request access for that easement through the property developer.
Okay. So the easement, I take it, because right now there's an easement that from the Revere Beach Boulevard down to where their building juts out and starts to go under. That's an easement that the St. George has the right to. We gave them permission to reconfigure that right-of-way when they started to build that building. So the easement goes from the boulevard down, and you take a right and you go behind those two little residential structures for their parking and for our easement. So the easement that I'm speaking of, they're granting you an easement from the building to your right-of-way. Okay. All right. So, and is that why you put the Jersey barriers there? There are Jersey barriers now blocking that right-of-way, that you cannot get a vehicle down there anymore.
If there are Jersey barriers blocking that, it's because it's state property, so we're not allowing any access to our property. We need permission or construction permit access in order to access that property.
All right, well, again, this has an issue of us possibly having a potential problem in the future. And again, we don't want to come up here and say that we're against it. We're not. We're 100% for it. We think it's a great idea. We just have to voice our concern that this project is going to significantly hamper our accessibility to our building in the future. Sure.
One thing I should mention, we had our second public meeting on Monday, and right now the public comment period is open for the next 2 weeks. So if you go on the mass.gov website, you can write comments to mass.gov. Any questions or concerns you have, you can make those comments during the public comment period, which I believe is open until December 13th, Skylar. So we'll be compiling those comments after the 13th and taking a look at those,
Okay,
based
so
on the design.
mass.gov?
Mass.gov.
We can certainly do that.
And that would be the appropriate forum, because this this conservation meeting is primarily for stormwater management issues and issues having to do with Diamond Creek,
Okay.
not access issues.
Okay, and I believe that is, those were all our concerns. And you mentioned about the trash receptacles, and I was just wondering if are they going to be planning on putting any portable toilet facilities on that site? That was just a question.
There was
So I
nothing
see.
in the plans for toilet facilities.
I see shaking heads no.
Only because I know that normally bocce is played by, it's an older generation sport. And they feel comfortable having facilities near them. So that was just a personal observation. But I thank you for your time. And obviously, we're looking forward to it. We're looking forward to the park, and we think it's going to be a great access. And we're very disappointed that this has, it could potentially have a negative impact on us. But I guess we're just going to have to adjust it accordingly, or accept it and work from that accordingly. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Gentleman in the back, did you want to speak?
Hi, Jim DeMiles, 350 Revere Beach Boulevard, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to be repetitive. The main concern is we use the park now on the north wall as an easement type deal, and it has been such since kind of like the 80s. With the new building going in, my concern is safety, for the simple reason the back of 350 Revere Beach Boulevard, which houses 244 units. It's a lot of people. It's straight up. Any kind of an emergency back there, you need a hook and ladder. I have fears that we wouldn't be able to get one back there without the easement through the park. I know this is the wrong committee for this, and I apologize. I just needed to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from? No?
Albert Fiore, 350 Revere Beach Boulevard. I appreciate you've answered pretty much all my questions. Public safety is a concern, but is this something that will be referred to the city council prior to final?
I don't know. It's probably gone through planning and
So again, we had our second public meeting on Monday that everyone was invited to attend, but we are in our public comment period for the next 2 weeks. So if you do have concerns or comments, you can write them to mass.gov and I can get you the website for that.
Okay. Thank you for your time and for answering all our questions.
all right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, going along with what the council was asking, I'd like to ask the person from DCR, at some point, do you talk to community development in Revere about this project? Or have they already been consulted?
We have, so the original reason we started this project was because Rosalie Vincent was the state representative at the time, and she approached us to turn this into a passive park, and she secured a $200,000 earmark for us. So this really turned into a project because of the state representative. So they have known about this and been on board since the beginning, and they've been invited to all of our public meetings.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name. Who's Steve?
The state representative, Rosalie Vincent, she's no longer in office, but at the time, she was the one who secured the earmark for this park.
I understand that, that's fine, that's very good. But again, does Revere, sometimes it seems like the DCR does what they do and doesn't take the city under their wing and explain what's going on. And perfect example was this whole parking thing that went on this summer that the public was not apprised of, as far as I know, came as a big shock to everybody. I'll also mention too that you people did a wonderful job at the bathrooms and the maintenance facility that you just built attached to the police department. It's a beautiful building. unfortunately, I can only give you a judgment from the outside, because the DCR has never asked for a certificate of compliance. So I've never been inside, none of us have, and we haven't been able to sign off on it. And it seems like sometimes the DCR just does what it does and doesn't take the Revere public into consideration on any of these projects. I think that's what Councilor Fury was alluding to also.
Well, so just to.
And that's why I asked that question about the fire department
Right.
being brought in, if they need access to the back of this property and to the back of the building.
Right, well, that's why we're trying to secure the easement through the building so that we can have emergency access to the park. And again, we've had a public process. The first public meeting was in July of 2020. We presented the 2 concept plans where anybody could come in and comment and give us their concerns, raise questions. We had the public comment period for those 2 weeks. We took those comments, we took that feedback, and that's where this revised concept plan and design came from that we presented on Monday to the public. And we did have a low attendance, but the DCR always puts out to the general public that we're having this meeting. It's on our website. We reached out to the City of Revere and the state representatives. So we do go through the public process.
Yeah, and you will concede that it's been very tough to do this in this whole COVID era.
It absolutely has. and
Especially with Zoom meetings and this and that.
Absolutely.
You just don't get the public input.
It is difficult, yes.
And if people don't know that there's something to look for, they're not gonna go and look for it. That's been the toughest issue, I think. They just don't know about it. So is this right here, is this your foray, just to check with us, see, what our ideas are? Are you then going to the planning board, or have you already been to the planning board?
This is our final design to go through the notice of intent to be signed off.
So have you already been in front of the planning board? Do you need to go in front of the
We
planning board?
do not need to go in front of the planning board. It's a state property.
So you haven't presented this to any of the other agencies?
We have not. We've gone through the public process with 2 public meetings.
So, but you would probably have to go through the fire department, right?
We can certainly speak with them about the access.
I think they'd appreciate that, and the DPW, right?
Well,
Just to
that-
make sure that you guys are all on the same page, if nothing.
So didn't you submit not only to the Conservation Commission copies to other agencies in the city?
We have a legislative office that deals with the outreach to the city and the other legislators that would be involved in the public planning process.
Because I thought there were some other departments in the city I saw on the, can you,
Are you asking if we've distributed the notice of intent to the different departments in the city?
right.
Yeah, all the departments on the list that were required to be submitted to, we did submit to, and I believe we emailed a copy of the signed list that they've all been received. I
Okay.
forget what departments exactly are on that list, but.
And then one last question for me. If you know, you might not know, but was the DCR aware and had given permission for that land to be used as access to the back of those buildings?
That I can't speak to that. I would have to talk to, we have construction access permit group that gives those permits out to allow access on our property. So in order to be able to use our property to take vehicles on it that are not state vehicles, you have to get construction access permit or permission to use the property.
Because even if you get the right-of-way through 320, it's a tunnel. So you're rather
Correct.
limited on height
Correct,
of what could go through there.
correct,
So
yes.
any large construction projects would have to set up on the street in front
Correct.
of the buildings.
Yes.
Yep, okay. Any other questions from the public? Okay, so we don't have a file number issued from the DEP, so with your agreement, we'll need to continue this hearing. I got a notice, and I'm sure you guys have it too, the DEP is 6 to 8 to 12 weeks with vacations and everything, so we have your agreement? Okay. You guys okay with continuing?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's a great plan.
Oh, I lost my agenda. We're going to jump to, on the agenda, to number 4, 8 Marshview Terrace and 10 Marshview Terrace. So I'll kind of introduce it for the record. We issued an enforcement order to both 8 Marshview and 10 Marshview, where there was filling completed, which impacted some resource areas. I want to say up front that both the owners of 8 and 10 Marshview Terrace have been very, very cooperative and conveyed more than once, they want to do the right thing. As part of the enforcement order, we asked them to engage a qualified wetland scientist to help come up with a plan to mitigate that area in the back of their property, which they have done. I've provided you a copy of the plan, and then you also have a copy of the photograph that kind of outlines what they want to do. So I'll just, if you want to kind of give us the highlights.
Sure.
State your name and.
My name is Matt Schweisberg with Wetland Strategies and Solutions, based in Merrimack, Mass. Excuse me.
It's really dry in here.
Yeah. But that's okay. Better than if it were raining or something, honestly.
Yes.
So what you have before you is just a conceptual restoration plan for the site. We met with John on the 18th, I believe it was, and talked through what we thought should be done, and at least initially, I believe you thought that was pretty good what we talked about. So all I've done here is committed to writing and provided a photograph of a Google Earth aerial shot to show what we're intending to do to remove fill and then restore the wetland that was below it. It's roughly, the total area is roughly about 1/4 to 0.3 acres. The fill would be removed, would have to have a site, a disposal site identified by whoever does that, the contractor, so that we're making sure they're not dumping it somewhere they shouldn't be. And they'll plant some wetland species in there that are in the plan. I gave them a list of a couple of things that I believe are appropriate for the site. And then to lay down a wetland seed mix, again, something that's appropriate that will tolerate a little bit of salt from the ocean spray or the wind. But it's a freshwater site. It's not salt marsh or anything like that. And I did not see any evidence of high tides getting in there. I suppose in an extreme storm and a nor'easter, you probably would get some inundation in there from Rumley Marsh, but no evidence of anything regularly. And they'll do that. It'll get monitored for the standard 2 years to make sure that the plants are taking hold. And generally, that would be it.
All right, do you guys have any questions?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. Were you able to ascertain the slope that was there prior to the fill being added?
Not really, because the fill is there, excuse me, and walking up to the backs of the houses that are there, you can see on the aerial photograph, I'm going to guess that the slope was probably in the neighborhood of 3 to 5% up toward the backs of the houses, or it didn't go all the way to the backs of the houses, but going up that way, maybe a little bit more than that. But it's really hard to tell. That would have to be discovered once they started to dig down and pull the fill out and see where the old wetland surface was or is. You know, this kind of forensic examination, it's a little hard to predict.
When I walked the site, you must have gone a second time with this gentleman. When I walked the site, I noticed that there was ledge on one
Yes.
rather high area, and then you
Right.
could obviously see the pitch
Right.
way down the other end.
Right.
And when I walked the property, I got as far as where the fillers ended, and there was a good 8 foot drop right there.
Yeah, it drops down right there.
But it's hard to figure out just what the slope was from the high point to the low point.
Exactly. And it slopes two ways. It slopes from that ledge area behind number 8, and then it also slopes to the east. So it's going sort of both west and a little bit to the east in terms of the slope. So again, once they start to pull the fill out, we'll get a better sense of that. But in a situation like this, it's always a little difficult to predict what you're going to find, but we'll see once they start to dig it all out. And we'll have to be flexible in terms of what we find and what, anything that needs to change a little bit as it gets done.
So will you be monitoring it during the excavation process?
I can, if that's what the landowners who are right here want me to do, yeah, and if the commission wants that monitored, yes.
I would appreciate you monitoring it, or, at least going in, if they do an excavation, you give them a scope of work, they do the excavation, and maybe you could just go in and check it out, see what you see. And if you think it's gonna be a significantly greater project, then maybe, come back to us.
Yeah, we'd definitely have to come back.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything else? You have a question, Robert? Can you, I was there, the quality of the plants that were back in that ditch area, it looked like there was a lot of invasive scrub.
No, most of it is a small willow that's growing in the bordering vegetated wetland. And you have to go a bit of a distance to get back toward where that, I think it's an old rail trail, but if you go if you go west, to the west and to a little bit to the southeast, you eventually get into some tidal areas where there is Phragmites and some salt marsh, but none of that reaches the areas that were disturbed.
Okay.
Or the existing BVW to the back of the properties right now.
Okay. And then with the recommended plantings, that's all going to happen in this area below the red, or
Yes.
below the green?
Yeah. Below the red, it might make sense to put a little bit of it just at the base of the slope in the green area, between the green and the red line. But again, that would be something I'd have to decide on the fly to see what it all looks like. But in any event, that would receive a seed mix to grass it in.
Okay. All right. So steps going forward, what we would do if we're good at this plan and we can add in some monitoring, we would amend the enforcement order to include this restoration plan with that additional condition. we would probably do that at the January meeting, or consider it then, because we'll need from you folks the schedule of when you plan to start. So I can include that in, the overall restoration plan.
Okay.
Okay, so I think what was required here was to come to this meeting and to report on progress. And so they've engaged a consultant, they've got a plan. We need the schedule, the timeframe to start, and when you think you can get it done. Understanding it might snow here.
Well, I mean, that doesn't stop backhoes from
It does not.
digging up.
It does not.
But
so.
the actual planting and/or seeding would have to wait, so we'd probably have to, at the base of a created slope, we'd have to maintain erosion control there.
Yes, yes.
I'm happy as long as we have a plan to address it, and we really appreciate you taking this and doing, taking care of it. I'm sure you didn't know what the rules were in the beginning, and that's fine, we understand, but you're taking responsibility for it. We really appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you all.
So, I think in the order it said something, you could finish up the plan and all that by the 23rd of December, and you can send it sooner if you have it, but then that would give us time to disseminate it among the commissioners, and then we'll discuss it again at the January meeting, and, okay? Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about the previous meeting, went a little bit long. So we'll come back to number 3. So this was a potential enforcement action on 630 Revere Beach Boulevard. I have had a recent email within the last 10 days. In this particular case, they moved a bunch of soil in their backyard. They're definitely in a floodplain. They're in the buffer zone. This is the house with the flags on front. Yep. We issued a warning letter, basically, an enforcement letter, cease and desist, come together with a plan. We agreed they would submit a plan on December 15th. And in the last correspondence with the owner, that is still their intent, is to submit a plan and a notice. In this case, they're going to do a notice of intent with that plan, notify the abutters, go through the whole process. A little bit different from the enforcement order. There's no notice of intent with this. This is, a little different. So they seem to be on track. We will find out if they adhere to that schedule on December 15th. So look at your emails. Site visits. The 630 Revere Beach Boulevard walk down, they wanted a certificate of compliance. They could not get all the work done before Thanksgiving. So that was canceled and dropped from the agenda. We'll probably see them in the next meeting. I did do a second because it was rather quick, because they wanted to come out, and it was 10 in the morning on a weekday for 8 and 10 Marshview Terrace to meet with the wetland scientist. So 630 Revere Beach, I'm sorry, I did swing by there and take a look because there was a complaint and nothing had happened there. It was 400 Ocean Avenue that got canceled, okay? Which kind of leads me to next meetings. If you look at the calendar, our meetings are on the first Wednesday of the month. So that means for January, the meeting would be on the first Wednesday. The day we would normally schedule site walkdowns would be New Year's Day, which I don't really want to do. So we can, because we haven't posted when the next meeting is, we can move that out a week and have it, the January meeting on the second Wednesday, if you guys are okay with that.
Works for me.
Okay. And then we would. Just for January. just for January. And then February and March, we'd keep it on the 1st, because I want to go ahead and get the website updated to get those dates on the website. We did have some correspondence. I forwarded it to everyone via emails. So that the state issued a certificate of compliance for 571 Revere Street. They just notified us.
Are there any on-sites coming up?
No. No. We have to find that out, yeah. No, the only on-site coming up maybe would be for 400 Ocean Avenue. But it hasn't been scheduled yet, so. We had a notice of activity and use limitation for Northgate Shopping Center. There was some type of an oil spill. So we were just notified.
Where was that?
Northgate Shopping Center.
In the rear of the?
Yeah, yeah.
Did it have to do with that oil spill at the
I don't know.
Rotary?
The company that sent the notice did not send the attachment, and the city and I have both asked them for that attachment to see exactly what's up on that.
They've also been doing work at the beginning of Ward Street, which goes in back of Galino's, starts at the Lynn Marsh Road.
Okay.
There's an auto body shop there.
Yeah.
And they were doing work, and there's a pit area that you could see the drainage and everything, just before you go into the BJ's parking area. So they were doing some work there, and I didn't know if it was in conjunction with the spill that occurred at the Rotary.
Yeah, I don't know. And then the last notification we got was from the DEP regarding time delays. They have forced vacations, they have to take it or lose it. And because it's the end of the year, they're being inundated with NOIs, and so they're just behind weeks.
By the way, that wasn't a casual comment they made to the DCR. They have not sought, as far as I know, and I was hopping on the previous commission to follow up on that. They've opened it, it's functioning, I believe that the bathrooms are working, and they've never asked for a certificate of compliance.
So,
And I don't know who to address that to.
So we have the ability as a commission to request or to remind them that the order of conditions, maybe it's expired, it's been 3 years, and just a friendly reminder that they should submit a request for a certificate of compliance. We also have the ability to go in and inspect if we request and ask. So if that's something we want to do, we can do that. All right, does anyone have anything else? All right, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All approved?
I
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're adjourned. Who gave